That was Mariah Carey, Always Be My Baby. So I grew up on 135th and Avalon. I went to a school called Avalon Gardens. I remember any number of times I would come home to my mother, and I would tell my mother about how people were mean to me, or how they talked bad to me, or they were talking about me. And my mother would invariably say, always and often, boy, they talked about Jesus. You think they ain't gonna talk about you? She would say it over and over and over again. As a matter of fact, earlier in my career, I would hear it all the time from family members about things that were said and done about me. Boy, they talked about Jesus. You think they're going to talk about you? Flash to a little more than a week ago with Jamie Foxx, who had just, as I recall, Jamie Foxx is not too long ago, was being prayed by Hollywood. He's being prayed for, and there were well-wishers that were being sent out, and rightfully so. Jamie Foxx has just came back on the public scene. He was visibly ill and shaken, but resolute and resolved, and we rejoiced. We were glad to have Jamie Foxx back. But a little more than a week after his return, of course, he was embroiled in some controversy. He said, they killed Jesus. You think they're going to kill you? What do you think they'll do to you? Or words to that effect. And instantly, people on the internet assumed that that was anti-Semitic. Now, I can only assume that because I'd heard that my whole life, and I went to a very black neighborhood, and that my mother was referred to certainly weren't Jewish. They were the little black kids, black boys and girls that went to my school. They were the black people there in my sphere. So I don't know how anybody extrapolated that they would all of a sudden be something other than Jamie's local colloquialism. That is something that is culturally, it is entwined in our communities. I would defy you to see very many black people who hadn't heard somebody in their life say they talked about Jesus or they did this to Jesus. What do you think they'll do to you? And that they would never had a racist or anti-Semitic tone to it. It was to demonstrate to you that this person came to save the world and they crucified him. What do they think? What do you think they'll do to you? You're not nearly as noble as he was. They were trying to trying to put you in your place. They were trying to reconfigure things to you. They were trying to give you some perspective. They were not deriding an entire race of people. It's interesting how a man who was just subject to people's prayers and well wishes would all of a sudden be vilified for saying something he did not say. I defy you to find black people all across this country who didn't share the same sentiment, who didn't say the same things. And those people aren't racist or anti-Semitic. Our mothers, fathers, friends, family said it all the time. They talked about Jesus. Do you think they're going to talk about you? That they was never anybody other than the people in your immediate surroundings. I would imagine that a man who had just came back from the brink of death might have learned something about somebody in his sphere. Might have learned somebody about the people around him. And it might have disappointed him. And he might have been spilling his words out into the public space. But I guarantee you it did not have the bent that society ascribed it to. That is something that I've heard my whole life, and I would venture to say many people did. And it certainly did not have what social media played it out to be. That they was never anybody other than the people in your immediate surrounding. A man fresh from people's well-wishers didn't even get grace. A man who we were praying for minutes ago didn't even get the benefit of the doubt. All of a sudden, he's an anti-Semite and a racist when he clearly was talking about an experience that was internal, that was about his fear. So you go from praying for somebody to praying on them? That a man who came back from the brink of death doesn't deserve your grace or consideration? What he was saying, what has been said in our communities for decades. It did not have a racist or anti-Semitic bent, and it is a shame that somebody who we were praying for so stridently earlier didn't even get the benefit of the doubt when he said something. You didn't even ask him what he meant. You didn't even ask for context. You ascribed something to him. Now all of a sudden he's something he never was because he was saying something he'd heard his entire life. You were praying for him before, and now he's not even good enough for grace? But I would have said, if I were Jamie, I'd have said, forgive me, it must have been my clone. There's a little note from the GED section. We've got the Jazz Report come up in 15 minutes. It's the D.L. Hughley Show.